storyteller is Debbie Gunaratne. Debbie lives in London, England. So it's a little late for her. I think it's about 1:15 in the morning. So bless her heart that she has agreed to join us. Debbie is a third generation storyteller from Sri Lanka, and she's considered a storytelling elder in her community. She tells stories from Sri Lanka and Asia, but her heritage is Sri Lankan, Chinese, Dutch, and Scottish. So many stories have been passed down to her. And these stories that she tells have been gifted to her orally by her family or by other elders. As I said, she currently lives in London and is the storyteller and creative trainer for the historic royal palaces. Now, isn't that a job that a lot of us storytellers would love to have? Anyway, Debbie, welcome all the way from London. Debbie is going to tell us the Ruby Prince.
Oh, thank you, Marva, and thank you for the previous story, which had ruby skin. So I think it leads quite nicely to this story. So as Marva said, I'd like to tell you a story from Sri Lanka. It is told by folk, but I'm not sure if it's called an actual folk tale again, Marva. So, but it's about humans and Nagas are supernatural, impossibly beautiful beings, and they are shapeshifters. They transform between cobra and human, depending on whether they fall in love or want revenge. And their king, the Naga king, has a crown, and in it it's set with a great diamond called the Naga Manikkaya. And the Naga Manikkaya is a stone of power, wisdom, and eternal life. So I'd like to start in the first language of Sri Lanka, which is Sinhala, and then I will move into English. Ahaganna. Mama etkota kienang kathandare, mage hirden kienang hinta, hondata ahaganna. Wivada namwalin hadinwena ektara rataka, me hiru yata nirandarean, muhuduralin sipaganna, ambatheru sevenie, samam pichama suwanda musu, pohia sanda elie, vihidunu eliak. Naga Manikkaya Eliak. And on such a full Poya moon night, there was a traveller. His clothes were worn and stained. His feet were embedded with the grit of the many roads he travelled. All he had were the stories in his head and the honesty in his heart. He walked along the Kaluganga, the Black River, and he knew he had to be safe, but he wanted a place to sleep. And as he searched around amongst the trees and the banks, he saw something glimmering. And curiosity impelled his feet. And when he came here, there he saw, nestled in emerald blades of grass, a stone which looked like it had caught one of the stars from the sky. And so bending down, he picked it up. Oh, it was heart-shaped. It was ruby red. It had a star within it. It was a star ruby, a stone worth a kingdom. He knew it was not a stone for him, and he decided there and then to take it to the king. So he put it in his pocket. He found a mango tree, he leant against it, and soon he was lulled to sleep with the sound of the Kaluganga and the scent of jasmine. Well, what woke him up the next morning was the sun warming his face, the sound of cloth beating against wet stone. And when he opened his eyes, there across the river, he saw young girls picking lotus buds to take to temples. He quickly washed his face and he started on the way to the palace. As he walked, He passed curving coconut trees with men tapping toddy. He passed mahouts sitting astride grey dahlia with waving trunks. He passed buffalo being milked to make curd to eat with sweet kithul honey. Soon enough, though, he arrived at the palace, and there he was shown to the king. And when he presented the king with the stone, the king, his eyes widened. A star ruby worth a kingdom? The traveller nodded. For you, Majesty. The king, he knew exactly what to do. He offered the traveller home in his palace. Stay here, be my advisor. And the traveller was looking for a home and he'd found it. So of course, everyone was happy. The king, though, he took the stone, he rushed into his room, and there he took a piece of gold and silk and he wrapped it carefully. He went to the great carved mango wood chest at the corner of his room. He opened it and he placed that cloth and that fabric in there. He locked the chest, he put the key on a chain, and he went to his wife. My dear, wear this around your neck. It has a treasure in the chest. Do not open it until I ask you. Of course she agreed. She could keep a promise for her husband. Well, that promise lasted 1 day, 2 days. In fact, it lasted a whole 7 days. And then she found herself in front of that chest, found herself turning that lock, found herself opening. Inside was a young man, raven-haired, green-eyed, golden skin, completely naked except for a piece of golden cloth. He looked up and smiled at her. She was transfixed. He stepped out, he took her hand, and he walked with her to the throne room. The king was quite surprised to see his wife being escorted into the room by a handsome young man, naked except for a piece of golden cloth. He recognized that cloth. And he was just about to question when his wife said, I'm sorry, my dear. I opened the chest and he was inside. Well, the king was trying to come to terms with all of this. Ruby Prince, Ruby Prince. Who are you? He questioned. What are you doing here? And all the young man would say is, I am the Ruby Prince, and I am here to fulfill my destiny. The king could not believe it. He took a glass of water, trying to calm himself down. He started blustering and questioning, and his voice got louder and louder. And all the prince would say was the same sentence over and over again. Out in the garden, the princess heard her father getting angrier and angrier, and she walked inside and she saw the prince. And when he saw her, he smiled, and she was transfixed. And her heart began to beat in a whole new rhythm. Her blood began to sing. Her father saw that. He wasn't having any nonsense with a stranger coming into his palace. And as the Ruby Prince stepped forward, he tried to step in between the two of them, but the Ruby Prince sidestepped him, walked up to the princess and took her hand. Princess, I am here because you are my destiny. And as he smiled and touched her hand, she knew it would be forever. Well, the king realized this, and he agreed. There was a great wedding. And on that wedding night, the prince, he said to his wife, "My dear, I will love you forever, but I ask you for one promise. You must never question me about who I am, who my family are, and where I'm from." And of course she promised. It didn't seem that big a promise to make. And they were happy. And you know, happiness, well, on the other side of the scale, there's always somebody who wants to destroy it. And these were the young men who had seen themselves as the next king. And so they started whispering, "Who is he? How do we know he's a prince? Who are his parents?" And those words slithered around the palace and into the ears of the king and queen. They weren't sure, but in the end they called their daughter to him and said, "My dear, what do you know about your husband?" And she had to agree that she didn't know very much. And when they asked her and questioned her, she said, "I promised." And finally the king said, "But you are queen, and he will be the next king. It is your duty." And so the princess went back to her husband, and that night she said to him, "Husband, tell me, who are you? Who are your parents? Where do you come from?" And she saw a shadow go across his face. She saw his eyes deepen with misery. And already she was regretting asking that. But he took her hand. "Come with me. You have asked the question, and I will tell you." And she tried not to go, but he pulled her out of the palace, down through the gardens into that Kaluganga, that black river. And there he said to her, "Wait here." And he stepped into the river. "You asked, and I will reply. I am the Ruby Prince. I am a Naga." And as she looked, the waters began to bubble and writhe, and they started to rise up his legs. And she said, "Please, enough. I am the eldest son of the Naga king." And the waters bubbled and rose high up to his heart. And she said, "No, don't tell me any more." And he looked at her. "I said I will love you forever, and I will. But now you ask the question, and I have replied. I am compelled to leave." And the waters rose above his head, covering him completely. And as she looked, his form shimmered, and he changed into a golden cobra and went off. And the princess called out for him, and she walked up and down the banks that night, calling, searching. And that's where the guards found her the next day. Well, they took her in. The king and queen tried to calm her down. They sent everyone to look. And although they looked, nobody could find the Ruby Prince. And as day followed day, she stopped eating. She stopped smiling. She became a shadow of her former self, a shadow that slipped through the palace. Until one night, 3 dancing women came to the palace, and there they danced for the king and queen. And as they danced, the king and queen had smiles on their faces, but the princess had hollowed eyes. When they stopped, the lead dancer went over to the princess and she said, "I have a story for you, Highness. Come with me." And the two of them walked into the garden, and the dancing woman had told her how the three of them, on their way to the palace the night before, had stopped by a mango tree. And something had woken her up, and thinking it was her companions, she'd looked. But they were asleep, and when she looked around the other side of the hill, she saw a great hole, and out came servants and musicians. They scattered rugs and cushions, and they bought food and drink. And she said, and behind them came the Naga king. I knew it was him because he had the Naga Manikaya in his crown. And all those beautiful people came and sat and ate and drank. And when they finished, the Naga king asked each of his sons to dance. Highness, the oldest son was your husband, the Ruby Prince. And as the dancing woman had started to talk, the princess could feel the blood surging through her body. Her heart began to beat faster. And she said, I have an idea. And she asked the dancing woman to teach her how to dance. Well, in 7 days, she surpassed her teacher. Every movement exquisitely beautiful. And then the princess waited till the next full moon. She dressed herself in a beautiful red and gold sari. She wove jasmine in her hair. And she walked to that mango tree and that hillside. And there she waited. All came to be as the dancing woman had said. Servants, musicians, food, drink, and impossibly beautiful beings. And when the king asked his sons to dance, and the Ruby Prince, her husband, stepped out, she stepped in front of him, and she began to dance. Thum, they thum, they thum, they na na. Thenaka, thenum, thenum, na na. She danced for the man who'd made her blood sing, and her heart beat to a whole new rhythm. Ipi the ebosat na lova vareka pahatharakithi sil naralova vanayaka. She danced for the man whose touch had meant forever. Raga sirin bibi min nadayen vedi nagasan memawannamanayadi. And when she stopped, the world stopped. All there were caught in the enchantment of her movement and the messages. As the world stopped, the Naga king jumped up and he said, I have never seen anything so exquisitely beautiful. Ask me what you wish and I will give it. And the princess bowed. Highness, give me back my husband, the man I danced for. The Naga king drew himself up. His face flushed, his eyes flamed. You have asked for something you have no right to. But then he saw his son, the smile on his face, and he saw the princess step towards him. And as their hands touched, he realized, if my son wishes, he can leave with you. Go now before I change my mind. And as their hands touched, this time they both knew it was forever. And so they turned to walk away and live happily And so it was, and so it continues to be.